The Great Chamber of Axiom Prime was a space designed to humble visitors and remind them of their insignificance. The ceiling rose so high that clouds sometimes formed near the top, and the walls were covered with holographic displays showing the 600-member species of the Galactic Council in all their diversity and power. Massive stone benches circled the central speaking platform in rising tiers, each section reserved for different delegations based on their importance and seniority. The humans had been assigned seats near the very back, almost against the wall, where they would have to strain to see the proceedings. Ambassador Elena Vasquez led her delegation through the great doors and felt 600 species turn to look at them. The chamber fell into a strange half-silence, conversations dropping to whispers as the newcomers made their way to their assigned section. Alana walked with her head held high, meeting the stares of beings that towered over her, slithered past her, or floated through the air on wings of light. She showed no fear because she felt none. "Look at them," a Crethry delegate rumbled to his companion, his voice carrying in the acoustic space. "So small, so fragile, so certain they matter." Elena heard and did not react. The 12 humans took their seats and waited as the chamber slowly filled with the rest of the delegations. The Vorthani arrived in a formation of 20, their reptilian bodies covered in ceremonial armor that gleamed under the chamber lights. Their leader, High Ambassador Ketharon, was enormous even by Vorthani standards, his scales a deep crimson that marked him as a member of their warrior caste. He looked toward the human section and let his lips pull back to show rows of sharp teeth in what might have been a smile or a threat. Finally, the lights dimmed and a column of brilliant plasma descended from the ceiling to hover above the central platform. This was High Arbiter Zelithkin, one of the Ethereans' beings of living energy who had helped found the Council millennia ago. His voice resonated through the chamber without any visible source, filling every corner with its ancient authority. "The Galactic Council is now in session," he announced. "We have gathered to address a matter of grave concern, an act of aggression by the species, known as humanity against the Vorthani hegemony." Elena listened to the formal recitation of charges without changing her expression. According to the Vorthani version of events, Captain Chun had launched an unprovoked attack on peaceful patrol vessels conducting lawful operations in the Helix Corridor. There was no mention of the refugee transport, no mention of the 40,000 Solvani, no mention of the demand for their surrender. The Vorthani hegemony requests that the Council hear their demands for restitution. Zelithkin continued. "I, Ambassador Ketharon, you may speak." The massive reptilian rose and strode to the speaking platform, his clawed feet clicking against the ancient stone. "Honored delegates," he began, his translator rendering his hissing voice into standard galactic. "Humanity has committed an act of war against our great hegemony. They have murdered 300 of our finest warriors without provocation or warning." Murmurs of concern rippled through the chamber. "We do not seek conflict," Ketharon continued, spreading his arms in a gesture of false reasonableness. "We are a peaceful people who desire only justice. Therefore, we present our terms for resolution." He activated a holographic display that listed the Vorthani demands in harsh red text. 10 colony worlds, complete fleet specifications. The surrender of Captain Marcus Chun for public execution. These terms are more than fair, Ketharon declared. They represent mercy, not punishment. Any other empire would demand the complete subjugation of humanity for such an offense. He turned to look directly at the human delegation, his eyes glittering with malice. "We await humanity's response." Every being in the chamber turned to look at the small group of humans in black uniforms seated against the back wall. Elena rose slowly, straightened her jacket, and walked down the long aisle toward the speaking platform. She could feel the weight of countless eyes upon her. The judgment of species who had negotiated in this chamber for thousands of years. When she reached the platform, She looked up at the towering form of Ketharon and the floating plasma of High Arbiter Zelethkan. And she did not bow. "I thank the Council for the opportunity to speak," she said, her voice clear and steady. "And I thank the Vartheni for presenting their version of events so thoroughly." She paused and activated her own holographic display. The chamber gasped as the image appeared, not charts or documents, but a recording from the cargo hold of the refugee transport Salvani families huddled together in the dim light. Children crying, parents trying to comfort them with fear written across their faces. "This is what the Vorthani call lawful operations," Elena said quietly. 40,000 refugees fleeing genocide, packed into cargo holds because they had nowhere else to go. The recording continued, showing the moment when the Vorthani patrol ships appeared, and their commander's face filled the screen with his demand that the transport surrender its passengers for processing. Processing. Elena repeated the word with cold precision, a pleasant term for slavery. These people had already lost their homeworld, their families, their everything. And the Vorthani wanted to take what little they had left. She looked at Ketharon, who had begun to shift uncomfortably. Captain Chen refused, Elena continued. He told the Vorthani that Earth does not surrender refugees to slavers. When they opened fire on the transport, he ended the threat. The chamber erupted in noise, some species protesting, others demanding order, still others engaging in rapid conversations with their neighbors. High Arbiter Zelethkan raised one tendril of plasma, and the chamber fell silent. "Ambassador Vasquez," he said, "the events you describe are not part of the official record. Do you have evidence to support these claims?" "I have the complete sensor logs from the transport and from the UNSS Righteous," Elena replied. "I have testimony from Captain Chun and his crew. I have statements from 7,000 Salvani refugees who witnessed the Vorthani demands. I will provide all of this to the Council for review." Ketharon's scales had flushed a darker shade of red. "These are lies," he hissed. "Fabrications designed to distract from humanity's crimes." "Then, you will not object to an independent investigation," Elena said calmly. "Let neutral observers examine all the evidence and determine the truth." For a moment, something like fear flickered in Ketharon's eyes before his expression hardened. "The Vorthani hegemony does not require investigation," he growled. "We require justice. Our demands stand." Elena turned to face the assembled delegates, her voice rising to fill the chamber. "The Vorthani want us to hand over 10 colony worlds filled with human families. They want the specifications of our fleets so they can destroy us at their leisure. They want Captain Chen executed for the crime of protecting innocent people." She shook her head slowly. "Humanity declines." The word hung in the air like a thunderclap. "We will not surrender our worlds." Elena continued. "We will not reveal our defenses. We will not punish a man for doing what was right. The Vorthani demands are rejected, completely and without reservation." Zelethkan's plasma form flickered with what might have been surprise. "Ambassador Vasquez, perhaps you do not understand how council proceedings work. This is merely the opening of negotiations. Surely there is some middle ground that can be found." "No," Elena said simply. "You must offer something," the arbiter pressed. "That is how disputes are resolved. Concession and counter-concession until agreement is reached." "High Arbiter," Elena replied, "with great respect, there are some things that cannot be bargained. We will not trade away innocent lives to satisfy the pride of slavers. This is not a negotiating position, it is a fact." The chamber descended into chaos. 600 species shouting and gesturing and demanding explanations. How could this tiny species refuse to bargain? Did they not understand the power arrayed against them? Were they suicidal or simply insane? Elena stood in the center of the storm, unmoved. and waited for silence to return when Zelithkin finally restored order. His voice carried a note of warning. Ambassador, humanity is young and perhaps does not appreciate the consequences of intransigence. The Vorthani hegemony commands vast fleets and countless warriors. If you refuse all compromise, there may be war. Then there will be war, Elena answered. And her voice did not waver. But we will not buy peace with the lives of refugees. She turned and walked back to her seat, leaving the great chamber in stunned silence. No species had ever simply refused to play the game until now. Sithis had served the Vexery Dominion Intelligence Division for 30 years, and in all that time she had never questioned an order. She was a good officer, a loyal officer, the kind of officer who did her job and asked no questions and trusted that her superiors knew what they were doing. But now, sitting alone in her small office aboard the intelligence vessel Quiet Shadow, she found herself doing something she had never done before. She was questioning everything. The war had begun 3 weeks ago, and the reports coming back from the front lines made no sense at all. The First Fleet had attacked a small human colony called New Helsinki with 200,000 warships, and somehow, impossibly, the fleet had been destroyed. Not defeated, not forced to retreat, but destroyed. 90% losses in 17 hours against a colony of only 12 million humans with a handful of defense ships. Sithis had read the report 5 times, and each time she became more confused. How was this possible? The Dominion had not suffered losses like this in 12,000 years of conquest. And now a single human colony had done what no empire in the galaxy had ever managed. She needed to understand. And so Sithis did something that could end her career, or possibly her life. She used her intelligence clearance to access the Galactic Council's sealed files on humanity. The files were supposed to be classified at the highest levels, available only to senior diplomats and military commanders. But Sithis knew the codes, and she knew how to cover her tracks. She told herself it was for the good of the Dominion. She told herself she needed to understand the enemy. She told herself many things, but the truth was simpler than that. She was afraid, and she needed to know why. The first file was titled The Persistence Reports, and it made Sithis feel cold in ways she could not explain. The report described how humans had evolved on their death world and the methods they had developed to survive. They were not the fastest creatures on their planet or the strongest or the most dangerous. They were something far worse. They were the creatures that never stopped. Human ancestors had hunted by simply following their prey, sometimes for days at a time, never attacking, never threatening. Just following and following and following until the prey collapsed from exhaustion and terror. The report called this persistence predation, and it noted that humans were the most successful persistence predators in known galactic history. Sithis read about how humans could run for hours without rest, how they could survive injuries that would kill most species, how they could push through pain and exhaustion through sheer force of will. And she began to understand something terrible. The Dominion had always won by being stronger and faster and more numerous than their enemies. But strength and speed meant nothing against an enemy that simply refused to stop. The second file was called Adaptation Studies, and it was somehow even more disturbing. Humans had not evolved for any single environment. Instead, they had evolved to adapt to every environment. They lived in frozen wastelands where the temperature dropped far below what any warm-blooded creature should survive. They lived in burning deserts where water was so scarce that most species would die in hours. They lived in dense jungles filled with poison and predators. They lived on mountains so high that the air was too thin to breathe. They lived in the depths of the ocean, in the hearts of swamps, in caves so deep that no light ever reached them. And when they reached out into space, they did not wait to evolve for it. They built machines to keep them alive, and they went anyway. The report noted that humans had colonized more environments in 300 years of space travel than most species, colonized in 10,000. They did not adapt to the universe. They forced the universe to adapt to them. The third file made Sithis want to stop reading, but she could not look away. It was called the Violence Archives, and it contained a detailed history of human conflict. The Vexeri had fought many wars, but their wars were logical things, fought for resources and territory and power. Human wars made no sense at all. Humans had fought wars over ideas, over beliefs, over words spoken centuries ago. They had destroyed their own cities rather than let enemies capture them. They had marched into certain death while singing songs and calling themselves heroes. They had split the atom, and the first thing they did with this amazing power was build a weapon to kill each other. They had used that weapon on themselves, on their own kind, and then they had built even bigger weapons. The report included images of human cities reduced to ash, of battlefields covered with millions of dead, of entire generations sacrificed for causes that were forgotten within years. And through it all, the humans had survived. They had survived ice ages and plagues and famines and floods. They had survived everything their world threw at them and everything they threw at each other. The fourth file was the shortest, but it was the one that made Sithis truly afraid. It was called the Spite Doctrine, and it described a behavior that no other known species exhibited. When most species were defeated, they surrendered. When most species faced extinction, they begged for mercy. Humans did not. The report documented case after case of human groups choosing death over surrender, choosing mutual destruction over defeat. Humans would burn their own crops rather than let an enemy eat them. Humans would poison their own wells rather than let an enemy drink. Humans would destroy everything they had built rather than let it fall into the hands of those they hated. The report called this spite, and it warned that humans would rather see the galaxy burn than admit defeat. Sithis sat in her dark office for a long time after she finished reading. She thought about the First Fleet, destroyed in 17 hours. She thought about the humans at New Helsinki, outnumbered millions to one, choosing to fight anyway. She thought about what the reports had said, about persistence and adaptation and violence and spite. And she finally understood why the Galactic Council had been so afraid. The Dominion had not declared war on a species. The Dominion had awakened something ancient and terrible. Something that had spent 40 million years fighting for survival against its own world and its own nature. Something that had won. Sithis began to compose a message to her superiors, urging them to seek peace while peace was still possible. But even as she wrote, she knew it was too late. The humans were coming, and they would not stop until the war was over, one way or another. She thought about the warning from the Galactic Council, the warning that the Dominion had ignored. Are they striking humanity? The Council had asked. Have they lost their wits? Now Sithis knew the answer. Yes, they had lost their wits, and they were about to pay the price. Admiral Vegsith stood on the command deck of his flagship, the Eternal Conquest, and looked at the human colony world with something close to pity. New Helsinki hung in space before him, a small blue and green world with 2 tiny moons, home to only 12 million humans. Behind him, arranged in perfect attack formation, waited the first fleet of the Vexeri Dominion. 200,000 warships, the largest invasion force assembled in 3,000 years, ready to crush this pitiful colony in a matter of hours. Vegsith clicked his mandibles in amusement as he watched the human defensive fleet scramble into position. They had maybe 200 ships, small and ugly things compared to the elegant vessels of the Dominion. It would be a slaughter. Open a channel to the colony, Vegsith commanded. Let them hear the terms of their surrender. The communication officer made the connection, and Vegsith spoke in the human language he had learned for this moment. People of New Helsinki, This is Admiral Vexith of the Vexery Dominion. Your species has refused our rightful demands 3 times. Now you will face the consequences. Surrender immediately, hand over your leaders, and accept Dominion rule, and we will be merciful. Resist, and we will turn your world to ash. You have 1 hour to decide. The Admiral expected begging, or perhaps angry threats, or maybe desperate attempts to negotiate. What he got was laughter. A human voice came back across the channel, calm and cold and somehow more frightening than any threat could have been. Admiral Vexith, this is General Okonkwo of the new Helsinki Defense Force. You have made a mistake. You have 1 chance to leave. There will not be a second warning. Vexith stared at the communication screen in disbelief. 1 chance to leave? He had 200,000 ships. You dare to threaten me? He demanded. With what army? What fleet? You have nothing. We have something your Dominion has never faced, the human replied. We have us. Now leave or stay and die. The choice is yours. The channel closed. Vexith turned to his officers, his compound eyes blazing with fury. All ships attack. Destroy their fleet and then burn their cities. Leave nothing standing. The first fleet surged forward, 200,000 engines blazing with power, ready to crush the tiny human force. And then everything went wrong. The human ships did not retreat or surrender or break formation. They charged. 200 ships against 200,000, and they attacked. Vexith watched in confusion as the human vessels tore through the outer ranks of his fleet, moving with a speed and aggression that no sane species would attempt. They were ramming, actual physical ramming, crashing their own ships into Vexery carriers, sacrificing themselves to take as many enemies as possible. What are they doing? Vexith screamed. This is madness. But it was only the beginning. From the surface of New Helsinki, weapons began to fire. Not energy weapons, not plasma cannons, not anything the Vexery had expected. Kinetic weapons. Massive chunks of metal, accelerated to incredible speeds, tearing through the first fleet like bullets through paper. The Galactic Council had banned kinetic weapons 10,000 years ago. Not because they were advanced, but because they were brutal. The humans did not care about council bans. The battle raged for 17 hours. Vexith watched his fleet die around him, ship after ship exploding or venting atmosphere, or simply going dark. The humans fought like nothing he had ever seen. When their ships were disabled, they did not surrender. They self-destructed, taking nearby Vexery vessels with them. When their pilots were wounded, they kept flying. When their ammunition ran out, they used their ships as weapons, crashing them into anything they could reach. And from the surface, the kinetic bombardment never stopped. The humans were firing chunks of their own colony into space, sacrificing their infrastructure to destroy the invaders. Admiral, we must retreat. His second-in-command shouted over the chaos. We have lost 60% of the fleet. No, we cannot retreat from humans. They are nothing. They are killing us. As if to prove the point, a human fighter crashed directly into the bridge of a nearby cruiser, and Vexith watched 5,000 Vexery die in an instant. All ships fall back. Fall back. The remnants of the first fleet fled, the greatest military force in the Dominion running from a colony world with a handful of defenders. They had arrived with 200,000 ships. They left with less than 20,000. In 17 hours, the humans had destroyed 90% of the first fleet, and they had done it while outnumbered 1,000 to 1. As the eternal conquest limped away from New Helsinki, a final transmission came from the surface. It was General Okonkwo, and her voice was still calm, still cold. That was a warning, Admiral. Go back to your Dominion and tell them what happened here. Tell them what we did with 200 ships and 12 million people. And tell them this: the next fleet you send will receive no warnings. We will not wait for them to attack. We will come to them. We are coming for all of you." Vexith did not respond. He could not respond. He had just witnessed the impossible. He had just watched his invincible fleet die at the hands of a species that everyone had told him was weak and primitive and easy to conquer. And now that species was angry. As the first fleet made its way back to Dominion space, reports began to flood in from across the galaxy. Human ships were moving, not retreating but advancing. Human colonies were not cowering but arming. And human voices were broadcasting on every frequency, the same message repeated in every language the galaxy knew. "You struck first. You killed our people. Now we strike back. Run if you can. Hide if you dare. We are coming, and we will not stop." The Galactic Council received the reports in silence. High Counselor Morvith read the casualty figures and the damage assessments and the human declarations of total war. "It has begun," he said to the empty chamber. "May the void help us all." The Vexery Dominion had wanted a war. Now they had one, and they were about to learn why the entire galaxy had begged them not to start it. 6 months after the Battle of New Helsinki, the Vexery Dominion was dying. Not from a single great defeat, not from a massive invasion, but from 1,000 small wounds that would not stop bleeding. Sithis stood in the command center of what remained of Dominion intelligence, watching the reports come in from across their territory, and each one was worse than the last. Supply convoy destroyed in the Outer Rim. Communication relay sabotaged in the Korath sector. Breeding colony attacked. Population evacuated before the humans arrived, but all infrastructure burned to ash. The humans were not fighting a war. They were hunting. That was the terrifying truth that Sithis had come to understand over these long months. The Vexery had expected the humans to attack their military installations, to fight pitched battles, to engage in the kind of war that the Dominion had fought for 12,000 years. Instead, the humans had vanished into the darkness between stars, and they struck without warning, without pattern, without mercy. They targeted everything except the military. Food shipments were intercepted, and entire colonies began to starve. Fuel depots were destroyed, and fleets found themselves stranded without power. Communication networks were crippled, and commanders could not coordinate their forces. Breeding worlds were attacked, not to kill the civilians, but to terrorize them, to make them run, to fill Dominion space with refugees that strained every resource. And the humans did all of this with a fraction of the Dominion's numbers. They did not need supply lines because they carried everything they needed or took it from their enemies. They did not need numerical superiority because they struck only where the Dominion was weak. They did not need advanced technology because they stole Vexery weapons and learned to use them better than the Vexery themselves. Sithis had seen the reports of human soldiers landing on Dominion worlds with captured Vexery rifles, wearing captured Vexery armor, flying captured Vexery ships. They adapted to everything. They learned everything. And they never ever stopped. In desperation, Sithis had done something that could be considered treason. She had reached out to the humans, using back channels and neutral intermediaries, hoping to negotiate some kind of peace. And to her shock, they had responded. She now sat in a small room on a neutral station, staring at a holographic image of a human female. Admiral Chun was her name, a thin woman with gray hair and eyes that held no warmth at all. "You wanted to talk," Chun said. "So talk." Sithis took a deep breath. "Admiral Chun, I represent a faction within the Dominion that wishes to end this war. We believe that peace is possible, that both our peoples can survive this conflict. Your people killed 12 million humans at New Helsinki, and you have killed far more of us since then. Yes, Chun replied, and there was no regret in her voice. We have, and we will kill more. We will keep killing until your dominion understands what it means to attack humanity. Is there nothing we can do? No terms you will accept? Chun was silent for a long moment. My grandfather died at New Helsinki. He was 73 years old, too old to fight, but he loaded kinetic rounds into the defense cannons until a vexury strike killed him. My daughter was there too, visiting for his birthday. She survived, but she lost her arm and her husband and her best friend. Civis felt cold. I am sorry. I do not want your sorry. I want you to understand something. We did not want this war. Humans do not seek conflict with other species. We have enough problems among ourselves. But you attacked us. You killed our families. You thought we were weak because we are young and few. We were wrong. Yes, you were wrong. And now you will pay the price for being wrong. What price? What do you want? Chun leaned forward, and her eyes seemed to burn with cold fire. We want your dominion to understand, truly understand, that attacking humanity is extinction. We do not need to destroy every vexury world. We do not need to kill every member of your species. We just need to make sure that you never, ever forget what happens when you threaten us. You would commit genocide? We do not have to. Your empire is already falling apart. Your subject species are rebelling because they saw what we did at New Helsinki, and they decided they would rather fight for freedom than be caught between the Dominion and humanity. Your colonies are starving. Your fleets are scattered. Your people are terrified. Sifis knew all of this was true. Then what do you want from me? I want you to go back to your leaders and tell them to surrender. Unconditional surrender. Give up your fleet, release your subject species, and accept whatever terms we offer. They will never agree to that. Then they will die. It is very simple, Ambassador. We gave you a chance to leave at New Helsinki. You did not take it. We gave you a chance to stop the war after the first fleet was destroyed. You did not take it. Now we are coming, and we will not stop until this is over. How can you be so cold? So ruthless? Chun smiled, and it was the most frightening thing Sithis had ever seen. We are not cold. We are not ruthless. We are humans. We feel everything, every death, every loss, every moment of this terrible war. But we have learned something over 40 million years of survival. Feeling pain does not mean we stop. It means we keep going. We cry and we mourn and we rage, and then we get up and we fight again. Why? Why not just accept defeat and survive? Because that is not who we are. We are the species that chased prey across continents until it dropped dead. We are the species that survived ice ages and plagues and nuclear fire. We are the species that looked at the cold, empty void of space and said, "We are going there anyway." We do not give up. We do not surrender. We do not stop. Chun stood up. Tell your leaders what I said. Tell them that peace is still possible, but only if they surrender. Tell them that every day they delay, more of their people will die. And tell them this, from me personally. My grandfather is dead, but I am still here. And I will not stop until this war is over. The hologram flickered and vanished. Sivis sat alone in the dark room for a long time, thinking about what she had heard. Then she began to compose her report. She did not know if her leaders would listen. She did not know if peace was truly possible. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. The humans were coming, and they would not stop. 1 year after the Veggery Dominion declared war on humanity, the war was over. The Great Hall of Nexus Prime was filled once again with representatives from across the galaxy, but this time there was a new seat at the table. Admiral Chun, now Ambassador Chun, walked slowly to her place among the elder races, and every eye in the chamber followed her. She was no longer the cold warrior that Sithis had met on that neutral station. She looked tired now, tired and old and sad, as if the weight of everything she had done pressed down upon her with every step. But she walked with her head held high, and when she sat in humanity's new seat, the chamber fell into complete silence. High Counselor Morvith rose to address the assembly. Let the record show that on this day, humanity takes its rightful place among the species of the Galactic Council. Let the record also show that the Vexery Dominion no longer exists as a galactic power. There was no celebration, no applause. The Vexery homeworld still existed, protected by a treaty that Ambassador Chen herself had negotiated. But everything else was gone. The Vexery fleet was scrap metal, scattered across 100 battlefields. The Vexery colonies were independent now. Most of them voluntarily surrendered to humanity rather than face the alternative. The Vexery subject species had all rebelled, watching the war and deciding that freedom was worth any risk, when the alternative was being caught between the Dominion and the wrath of Earth. An empire 12,000 years old had been destroyed in a single year. Not by conquest, not by genocide, but by fear. The humans had made the Vexery so afraid that their own subjects had turned against them. That was perhaps the most terrifying lesson of all. Morvith continued his address. Let all species gathered here understand what has happened. The Vexery believed that humanity was weak because they were young. The Vexery believed that humanity would submit because they were few. The Vexery believed that war with humanity would be easy because humans fought among themselves. The old counselor paused. The Vexery were wrong. Humanity is not weak. They are merely patient. Humanity does not submit. They have never submitted to anything, not even their own world. And humans do not fight among themselves because they lack the ability to unite. They fight among themselves because they have no one else worthy of fighting. Until now, someone whispered. Yes, until now. The Vexery gave humanity an enemy, and humanity united against that enemy with a speed and fury that defied all prediction. They went from 12 colonies to controlling half the former Dominion's territory in less than a year. Not through conquest, but through fear. Morvith looked around the chamber. Species that had served the Dominion for millennia chose to ally with humanity rather than fight them. Worlds surrendered before human ships even arrived. The Vexery's own allies abandoned them because they saw what humans could do, and they wanted no part of it. The old counselor turned to Ambassador Chun. And now, Ambassador, will you address the council? Chun stood slowly. I will. She looked around the chamber at the representatives of 47 species, all of them watching her with a mixture of respect and terror. I want to tell you something about humanity, she began, her voice quiet but clear. We did not want this war. We have never wanted war with any species in this galaxy. We have enough problems of our own, enough conflicts, enough suffering. We came to the stars hoping to find peace, hoping to find friends, hoping to build something better than what we left behind. She paused. But we have also learned something over 40 million years on a world that tried to kill us every single day. We have learned that peace is precious, but survival is more precious. We have learned that kindness is a virtue, but weakness is a death sentence. We have learned that mercy is noble, but only after victory. The Vexery did not give us a choice. They demanded our submission. They attacked our homes. They killed our families. And so we did what we have always done when something threatens us. We fought back. Chen's voice grew harder. We did not fight for territory or resources or power. We fought because we had to. We fought because that is what humans do when we are threatened. And we did not stop fighting until the threat was eliminated. But we did stop, she continued, and her voice softened again. We stopped because we are not monsters. We stopped because we did not want to destroy the Vexery. We only wanted them to stop trying to destroy us. Their homeworld still exists. Their people still live. We could have ended them completely, but we chose not to. She looked directly at the Vexery observer who sat in the back of the chamber, a survivor of a fallen empire. Remember that. Remember that we showed mercy when we did not have to. Remember that we stopped when we could have continued. And remember this, we will never forget what you did, but we have chosen to forgive. Then Chun turned to address the entire chamber. So here is our promise to this council, to every species gathered here, to every civilization in this galaxy. Leave us in peace, and you will never see what we can truly become. Trade with us, and we will trade fairly. Work with us, and we will work in good faith. Be our friends, and we will be the best friends you have ever had. Her eyes hardened. But do not mistake our kindness for weakness. Do not mistake our patience for passivity. Do not mistake our desire for peace as an inability to make war. The Vexery made that mistake, and look what happened to them. She sat down. That is all I have to say. The chamber was silent for a long moment. Then Morvith spoke again. The council votes to grant humanity full membership with all rights and privileges. The council also votes to grant humanity unlimited territorial expansion rights in former Dominion space. And the council votes to exempt humanity from all military inspection treaties. The votes were unanimous, not because the council agreed with everything humanity had done, but because they were afraid of what might happen if they disagreed. Later, after the session ended and the delegates returned to their ships, Morvith sat alone in his office. He opened humanity's file in the council database and added one final note. It said simply, "Do not, ever, under any circumstances, give them a reason." Then he closed the file and stared out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the humans were building their civilization, expanding into the ruins of the Dominion, growing stronger every day. They were young still, the youngest of the great powers. But they would not be young forever. And when they reached their full potential, when they had centuries of space travel behind them instead of decades, when they had truly learned to use the technology they were still mastering, Morvith shuddered. He hoped he would not live to see that day, but he knew that his grandchildren would, and their grandchildren after them. The humans were part of the galaxy now, and the galaxy would never be the same.